Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. So it seems that Jake Paul has solidified himself as the face of boxing. I saw Dante's Boxing Nation, of course, hating on Jake Paul, acting as if the only reason the fight was successful was because of Mike Tyson. That's like saying the only reason that Ryan Garcia Tank Davis was successful was because of Tank Davis, or that Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor was only successful because of Floyd Mayweather. People are delusional and love to push the race narrative. The reality is, Jake Paul's been putting out tons of successful pay per views. This fight was free. Well, with a Netflix subscription. So basically, it was free because we all have Netflix anyway. The reality is that this fight was huge because Jake Paul was fighting on Netflix with Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor on the undercard against Mike Tyson. And a lot of delusional people wanted to think that Mike Tyson, at 58 years old, actually could be the one to put a beating on Jake Paul. But the reality of the situation is, it always played out the way it was going to play out. Anybody that really paid attention wasn't surprised by the performance, right? That's why I didn't talk about it. That's why I wasn't excited about it. The undercard, I thought was pretty good. Pretty good, especially considering that it was free and you knew it was going to put up huge numbers on Netflix. And hopefully this is enough to get Netflix to put on more boxing, because it was super successful. Even though a lot of, Monday night quarterbacks are complaining about it, because unfortunately they're so delusional. They thought that Tyson was going to come in and somehow be like great, even though we saw Tyson when he was still fighting near the end of his career, and he wasn't great, losing to bum-ass opponents. So what do you expect to happen 30 years later? But the reality is, Jake Paul is the face of boxing in America now, and I don't say this because I'm happy about it. It's unfortunate that a social media person is somehow the face of boxing, putting on the biggest events and breaking historical ground by fighting on Netflix and putting out a huge, huge, huge event, right? And thanks to him, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano both got paid $6 million each. Thank you very much, Jake Paul, right? That's because of him as a promoter putting on that event. So he's helping the sport of boxing as well, not just by putting out his fights, which generally I don't pay attention to, but it's the fights with real boxers that were on it. And that's what's significant. Even a world title fight from the men's side was on this fight card. And so obviously we need to give respect to that. But the irony is, the day after, now Andre Ward is out. And this is the same Andre Ward that was getting paid by MVP to fucking commentate for this fight, and was coming out actually acting as if he thought Mike Tyson might actually do something. Yet this is a boxing guy, an expert, a pundit, yet he believed that 58-year-old Mike Tyson actually had some sort of shot. Right? Now this guy's coming out asking for a payday. Of course he is, because that's what Andre Ward does. He clout chases paydays left, right, and center. He's been doing it towards Canelo Alvarez for the last 4 or 5 years. So who would be shocked and surprised that now he's doing it with Jake Paul? We saw, of course, Better Biev come out. We saw Daniel Dubois come out. We've seen everybody literally coming out, calling out Jake Paul for a fight right now, because they know they're going to get paid huge cash to fight him, right? They wouldn't fight him if they weren't making any money. If Andre Ward was going to get paid like $100,000 to fight Jake Paul, but to do it for the sport of boxing, he wouldn't fucking take that fight. He wouldn't get out of bed. He wouldn't even consider it. The reason he's talking about it is because he's thinking about tens of millions of dollars and thinking about potentially making $20 million for fighting Jake Paul. That's what's doing it, right? When Canelo said, he wants a payday, he wasn't lying. And this is exactly what all these people that are literally calling out Jake Paul want, a payday, right? The irony is, I saw speculation from Dan Canobia that Canelo Alvarez is going to fight him. But the only person who hasn't come out and called out Jake Paul is literally Canelo Alvarez, right? He's not lowering himself to that level. You know why? Because he doesn't need Jake Paul. He's getting paid millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for every fight he puts out. So he doesn't need Turkey Al Sheikh, he doesn't need Jake Paul. He can continue to do what he's doing and make tens of millions of dollars every time he steps in the ring. All these other guys, unfortunately, they're not getting paid like that. So, of course, they go running to the door for an opportunity of a lifetime. And that's what it is for them, an opportunity of a lifetime to potentially make big money for an opponent that's not really that dangerous, to be fair, right? Of course, we heard speculation about Ryan Garcia. You know, of course, they know each other through social media. Obviously, he was around when both brothers first started getting into the boxing game, probably was a bit of an inspiration to those two guys, right? So they have a relationship. So you could see them doing this just because marketing-wise, it would be super successful, even though Ryan Garcia is very small in comparison to Jake Paul. So I don't know how much that makes sense, but nonetheless, if they made that fight, I'm sure it'd do fucking excellent, right? Because Ryan Garcia obviously is a big name with his controversial antics, and Jake Paul is literally the face of American boxing. The fight that we're hearing that makes the most sense is a Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And this was already something that we knew was a possibility because literally they fought on a same card together. So, you know, when that happened, the writing was already on the wall. So if this now happens, you know, nobody's going to be shocked or surprised. It's a legitimate opponent for Jake Paul. Obviously, Mexican-American fans are going to be on top of it because, you know, they support his father, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., and they early on were supporters of the son. Now him potentially getting in there and take on Jake Paul, that's a fight that actually makes sense, right? You know, you got name recognition, an opponent that actually brings something to the table financially. He's not peaked at a point where he's so dangerous that, you know, it might be a fight that's too much for Jake Paul to bite off. Actually, his last performance we saw, you could see the possibility of those two guys fighting and it being pretty competitive, right? So don't be surprised if Jake Paul's next opponent is Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And I, for one, think it's a pretty good fight. And for a novice boxer like Jake Paul, it's the perfect kind of opponent at this point. You're literally fighting an ex-world champion, so it's not like you're fighting a bum. He's not that old, so it's not like you're fighting an ancient guy either. Has he been active? Has he been doing a lot in the sport recently? No. But nonetheless, that shouldn't really take away for the fact that he is a legitimate boxer who was a legitimate world champion during his career and has a very solid resume. Whereas Jake Paul has just been a social media boxer, basically picking and choosing his opponents based on name recognition and marketability. You can't hate him for that because he's smart enough to understand what sells and he's capitalizing on it. But all these other boxers that now are fucking trying to whore themselves out for a payday, because that's what it is. Literally trying to whore themselves out as the B-side to a Jake Paul pay-per-view. It's pretty pathetic, to be truthful, you know, because, you know, who really wants to see Jake Paul versus Andre Ward? Nobody really. Who expects to see Jake Paul versus Beterbiev or Daniel Dubois? Those guys got real legitimate fights that we want to watch. Nobody's interested in them seeing them lower themselves to Jake Paul's fucking level. No way, right? But Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., yeah, that shit makes sense. 100%. But let me know in the comment section below what you think about all these boxers, ex-boxers, current boxers, active boxers, whoring themselves out for a payday. Because that's what it is. I mean, another opponent I wouldn't mind seeing him in with would be Carl Froch. Carl Froch has been retired a little longer than Andre Ward. He's still in great shape. And obviously he was a very, you know, accomplished world champion during his period of time. And he's got the whole UK crowd behind him. So unlike Andre Ward, he is marketable. And you could see that fight actually doing something as far as numbers globally, especially on, say, a Netflix. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.